human body communication directly. The intercorporate wireless network of nanocommunications. If we assume that the MAC phenomenon is proven and that vaccinated people emit these addresses visible through the Bluetooth protocol, then it seems logical to think that vaccines are responsible for this effect. This is even more true when the first observation of the phenomenon occurred just after the start of the vaccination plan for the population. In other words, there is a very clear and evident cause and effect relationship that cannot be ignored in any way. Therefore, the question must be asked, what is it in the vaccines that are responsible for the MAC emissions phenomenon? The only thing that can be causing this is the presence of an intercorporeal network of nanocommunications. According to the literature consulted, how can it be defined? An intercorporeal network of nanocommunications is a topology of micro or nanoscale devices which is present inside the human body and which maintains a bidirectional communication in an upward or downward direction, that is outward from the body to emit data and well as inward to receive instructions. The purpose of an intercorporeal network is very diverse. For example, biomedical uses which facilitate the control of physiological parameters, heart rate, blood pressure, glucose levels, respiratory rate, etc. Also, neuromodulation, neurostimulation, interaction with the functioning of vital organs, measurement and interaction of neurotransmitters, alteration of brain, electrical activity. It is rather complicated to infer which of these applications, if not all, are the ones that have been predefined for this intercorporeal network. We will talk about that in the last section of this exposition. Now let us describe the topology of the intercorporeal network. The devices connected to the network. For the purpose, we will state from the device at the lowest level to the most complex at the highest level. 1. Nanonodes. Nanonodes, also known as nanosensors, are nanometer scale objects that would be very difficult to observe under optical microscope unless they form clusters. Their function is to propagate through the cardiovascular system of the human body, arteries, capillaries, and heart, in order to facilitate the propagation of wireless signals of the intercorporeal network in order to carry a main function. The nanonodes must number in the thousands, with the aim being present at any point in the bloodstream. The question therefore arises as to what material present in the vaccines would be responsible for creating these nanonodes. The most likely hypothesis is that it would be through graphene oxide, whose decomposition would occur gradually, forming the well-known quantum dots or GQDs. In this way, with the relatively small amount of it, it would be feasible to create thousands of quantum dots as a product of decomposition of larger sheets, causing their dissemination through the body until they reach a sufficiently small size to be unaffected by the immune system. On the other hand, as is already known, has superconducting properties, and when it is reduced to a nanometer scale, it also acquires quantum properties, which gives it the ability to propagate signals or pulses as if it were an antenna. In fact, it has been demonstrated that graphene is capable of absorbing electromagnetic radiation and amplifying signals from gigahertz to terahertz, which makes it the ideal material to achieve desired propagation in the intercorporeal network. Micro or nanosensors. Sensors at both scales are described in the scientific literature, assembling devices for monitoring physiological parameters, collecting electrical signals, metrics, and quantitative evaluations in the human body, but also as an interface for interaction with target organs. For example, micro/nanosensors can be made up of lattice of nanosheets and carbon nanotubes or carbon fibers. These lattice adhere to the walls of the endothelium, the cardiac and arterial systems, and even in the brain tissue due to their ability to overcome the blood-brain barrier. Once established, generated electrical conduction paths equivalent to the wires of a circuit, which, together with the superconducting capacity of the material, becomes a field effect transistor. This makes it possible to detect the electrical pulses of the organ with which it is in contact, for example, the heart, the brain, or the tissue in the lungs, but also interact by emitting electrical discharges, since they can also act as supercapacitors. Due to the electric properties they possess, in this sense they would act as an interface. Since given a certain signal at the appropriate frequency, they could trigger these discharge operations. This applies to organs such as the heart, and even respiratory system could cause choking sensations, fainting, arrhythmia, or heart attacks. In the case of brain tissue, the scientific literature is very profuse and includes a multitude of experiments and tests with carbon nanotubes and graphene oxide nanosheets to act as electrodes, capable of acting as bridges between neurons and stimulating their electrical activity, which makes it possible to de facto to create artificial axons and influence segregation of neurotransmitters. Presumably this would make it possible to enter with the proper functioning of a person's monitoring the electrical conductivity of the brain regions, altering behavioral thinking and conduct, and so on. Micro and nano routers. These are devices whose function is to collect and process the data obtained through the nanonodes and nanosensors, sending the propagation and the information to the micro or nano interface so that the data is transmitted from the inside to the outside of the body. It can also act in the opposite direction, that is, from the outside to inside the body, which it will receive the signal from the micro nano, decoding and routing it and retransmit it to the rest of the elements of the intercorporeal network. In many references consulted, these routers consist of micro antennas or plasmonic nano antennas, transmission circuits, encoding and decoding signals according to a MAC protocol which determines the rules of construction of messages and antenna emissions. In addition, these micro antennas are responsible for translating the lower level signals produced by the micro nano sensors and micro nanos. Signal known as TSOC signals are the most recognized in all scientific intercorporeal networks because they have a low energy emission cost. Also, because of their simplicity, due to the fact that they are binary signals which collect electrical pulses with the value 1 and silence with value 0. In this way, the potential variations and pulses sensed by the micro sensors and micro nano nodes throughout the body can be transmitted by TSOC so that they can be received by the micro nano router. According to the literature, the micro nano router could be the key to the phenomenon of MAC broadcast, since the data sent from inside to the outside the human body is according to a medium access protocol which determines headers, data, packets, structures, coding, frequency, hopping, map, encryption, and so on. Being able to detect MAC addresses means that the designers of the intercorporeal network most likely designed to use Bluetooth low energy protocols, also known as Bluetooth low energy. However, being able to see and detect these on the cell phone does not mean that they are using exactly the same protocols. In fact, it is not possible to link or connect to the anonymous MAC devices. Micro and nano interface. It is defined in scientific literature. It is a hybrid device responsible for capturing the signals emitted from the outside and transmitting them inward, or performing the reverse process outward to emit data. Its function is to pass through the skin barrier, which greatly reduces the effectiveness of the emissions. Therefore, it can be considered a repeater and a signal amplifier. This device maintains communication with the micro router, reproducing transmission of data packets. According to the MAC protocol, the range of the micro antenna facing emissions is limited. According to the literature consulted, specifically a few meters due to mitigation of the signal caused by layers of the skin. However, long transmission distance is not necessary either, considering that the recipient of the signals is the user's cell phone, also known as the gateway, which will be responsible for transmitting the data packet to another more recipients via the internet. Gateway, as indicated above, the objective of the emissions from the micro router and the micro interfaces to reach the gateway, recognized in various publications as a cell phone, tablet, or wearable device with internet connection. Applications of the intercorporeal network. So I will list them in the one Neurosurveillance. The disposition of carbon nanotubes in the neural tissue would facilitate the monitoring of brain activity. It should be noted that brain activity can be reached from electrical signals from different areas of the brain. Therefore, these signals could be conducted through the intercorporeal network to generate a data flow that would be transmitted to the outside of the body and sent to remote servers for automatic interpretation using big data and machine learning techniques. In this way, it would be possible to have knowledge of people's moods, thoughts, behaviors, states, etc. 2. Neuromodulation. It involves the interaction in the human psyche through the electric modulation or one or more multiple zones of brain tissue. According to frequency pattern, this is possible if carbon nanotubes and nanosheets in the neural tissue receive the appropriate electrical pulses, which will create electromagnetic currents that will alter the normal functioning of the brain, developing desired behavior, emotion, mood, or even thought. Possibly, this is where the concept of thought grafting can be associated. While this may be difficult to assume, it is true that there are extensive databases that locate by electrical encephalography specific regions of the brain that are pulsed by certain actions, thoughts, and attitudes, feelings, and even words, phrases. And taking this into account, artificial intelligence programs can be developed to redirect people's behavior and attitude to influence their life, work, and economic decisions. Neurostimulation, closely related to neuromodulation. Neurostimulation would be responsible for stimulating the segregation of neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are naturally segregated as a result of synaptic communications between neurons, facilitating the transmission of messages, information, and signals throughout the central nervous system of the body. An intercorporeal network with carbon nanotubes and nanosheets and neural tissue could increase or decrease the segregation of these neurotransmitters decisively, affecting signal emission and reception. For example, false sensations of danger, fear, pain, etc. could be provoked without any justified cause. To give another example, the regulation of dopamine alone could cause neurodegenerative diseases, anxiety, depression, apathy, bipolar, psychotic attacks, among others. Disorders and problems. An interesting regulation of dopamine would affect the reward system of people, affecting desire, pleasure, and above all, conditioning. This means that a subliminal condition learning can be achieved so that the undesired behaviors and attitudes could be channeled in people, bending to a certain extent and free will that characterizes a free human being. Dopamine could also create addiction just like a drug, such a way that very strong habits can be created according to the interests of a third party, outside the will of the inoculated person. 4. Connected humanity. The human collective inoculated with the presupposed content of the vaccines would make it possible to exercise exhaustive control over human activity, health status, work performance, or academic performance, influenced by currents of thought and subliminal communication strategies, facilitate the acceptance of measures that are unpopular or negative for the interests of the population. Then the war and any resistance to a certain task or function or undesired task, reduce energy consumption, reduce the use of consumption of essential resources, facilitate the forecasting of the demand for products, goods, and services. The possibilities of a connected humanity are inherent in the concept of the Fourth Industrial Revolution or transhuman techno paradigm. Whether at the political, economic, social, or personal level, the individual is a feedstock. An intercorporeal network turns the individual into a feedstock. This is an inexhaustible source of information, generating data to record, evaluate, and process for social, economic, scientific, and political use. Perhaps partly for this reason, inoculated individuals could receive a universal minimum income in exchange for handing over the data they may generate in the course of their lives. However, becoming a source of information subject to continuous monitoring would make it possible to calculate or weigh the value of each person according to their capabilities, their capacity for thought, reasoning, analysis, behavior, loyalty to the system, and thus determine which people are more suitable, profitable, and beneficial to society. This coefficient, which would measure the value of a person, can be used to determine his success in society and in life, as well as to decide his destiny. An aspect that links the following applications, use, or rather consequences of the intercorporal network: population reduction. According to the neo-Malthusian thesis, the intercorporal network would make it possible to know the value of each person and determine what part of the population should be eliminated, presupposing that there is an excess population that cannot be maintained and that reduces the resources available for the part of the population that is productive. Greater added value. This would mean that the most absolute reification of the human being, deny all spirituality and freedom that are proper to people by the mere fact of existing. By obtaining a cutoff figure, all those people who do not exceed the established threshold can be gradually eliminated by means of the intercorporal network itself, as explained below. 7. Elimination of the intercorporal network cannot only operate in the neural environment, but also in the cardiovascular system, and especially in the heart. If the right signals are received, an artificial alteration in the heart rhythm can be triggered, which would trigger arrhythmias and henceforth heart attacks. An electric to the brain at the right intensity and in the right location could cause fainting, loss of balance, unconsciousness, with the attendant danger. The person, therefore, based on biodirectionality stated in the literature on intercorporal networks, it is not unreasonable to think that signals could also be received that could trigger the disorders and conditions that lead to the elimination of the person. This ability to be able to eliminate a person who is either unprofitable in the New World Order or who does not accept the approaches desired by the elite or who is part of the dissidents or opposition is extremely clean, leaves no traces, and the crime is particularly effective in maintaining control and power over the population.